The promise of fat burners is essentially a cheat code for weight loss. Who doesn't love the idea of burning more calories while doing less? If we assume that fat burners increase your weight loss efficiency by even 10%, that could end up cutting weeks off of your weight loss program. This promise of rapid weight loss is especially appealing to patients with thyroid dysfunction. But the real question here is, do they work? And the answer is yes, but only if you use the right ones at the right doses. Because we're talking specifically about thyroid patients, I'm going to focus only on the most powerful. But note that these are going to be effective for anyone who's trying to lose weight, not just thyroid patients. Number 1 on the list is a compound called alpha yohimbine. Sometimes referred to as raucine, alpha yohimbine is the king of fat burners. It's derived from the bark of trees that are native to Africa, and it's used there to enhance vitality. But research has shown that it can accelerate weight loss by inhibiting alpha-2 adrenergic receptors. These receptors just so happen to be found in high concentrations in stubborn fatty areas of the body like your lower abdomen, hips, and thighs. In a somewhat confusing way, the inhibition of these receptors actually increases fat breakdown. A big part of the reason that people struggle to lose weight in these areas is because of the presence of these receptors. But when you inhibit their function, you encourage the release of their fatty acids. In effect, what you're really doing is blocking the blocker. Since thyroid patients often struggle with the characteristic thyroid body shape as well as the characteristic thyroid belly, yohimbine is a great match for people with this condition. But it's not without its faults. The first is that yes, yohimbine encourages the release of fatty acids from your fat cells, but you still must burn them for energy after they're released. This means for best results, you need to be combining yohimbine with exercise. If you don't, then those fatty acids that are released will eventually make their way right back to the fat cells and you'll end up right where you started. This isn't necessarily a downside, but it is something that you should be aware of. The second is that because yohimbine interacts with your sympathetic nervous system, it increases the release of a compound called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine, which is also known as noradrenaline, increases heart rate, blood pressure, and energy. This is great if you're trying to lose weight because it revs up your metabolism, but not so great if you're the type of person that tends to already be overstimulated, or if you're someone who struggles with anxiety or insomnia. Its stimulating effects are pretty mild, probably on par with something like caffeine, so it's generally not an issue, but it's still something that you should be aware of. The maximum dose of yohimbine that you want to take each day is 3 milligrams. But for thyroid patients, I'd recommend a dose of around 1.5 milligrams per day just because it can be stimulating. Number 2 on the list is a compound called Forskolin. Forskolin is the bioactive compound found in the plant Coleus forscoli, which is the only plant, by the way, that is known to contain this compound in high amounts. It's notable because it activates and enhances the function of an enzyme called adenylate cyclase. This in turn triggers a response which increases a compound called CAMP. You don't really need to know or understand how this is all working, but what you should know is what happens inside of your cells with increased CAMP levels. Some of those benefits include things like increased fat breakdown, the production of more cellular energy, the preservation of muscle cells, an enhancement in blood flow, and better regulation of your hormones. What's even more notable here is that there are very few things that increase CAMP levels in cells, and Forskolin is one of them. But others include compounds like caffeine, other hormones, and even exercise. Research has shown that if you want to get the beneficial effects of Forskolin, you need to use 50 milligrams per day. But because most extracts of Coleus forscoli only contain 20% Forskolin, you'll need to use a dose total of about 250 milligrams. Next on the list is green tea extract. Because green tea has been used for thousands of years, we have tons and tons of retrospective studies looking at people who have consumed it. What researchers can do is look back and evaluate 2 different groups of people, let's say people who heavily consume green tea versus people who do not, and then compare the 2 and see if there are any differences. From this research, patterns become evident and we can then make assertions about the benefits of this compound. Among the most relevant to this discussion is the fact that researchers have found that in people who frequently consume green tea, they have 19.6% less body fat compared to people who do not habitually drink green tea. This heavily suggests and implies that there's something beneficial about green tea in its ability to help with weight loss. Some people believe that this benefit is primarily related to its caffeine content, but that can't explain all of the benefits because we see decaffeinated green tea extracts still provide some of these same benefits. The current thought is that green tea upregulates the genes that are responsible for the breakdown of fat and the preventing of fat storage. As far as green tea extracts go, if you want to use it, look for a compound that has the following attributes: a standardized amount of polyphenols at least 98% or greater, catechins at least 80% or greater, EGCG at least 50% or greater, and caffeine at least 2% or less. Another lesser fat promoting compound is Fucoxanthin. It's a vitamin A-like compound that is found in brown seaweed and in fact is what gives brown seaweed its brown color. Acting as a bioactive compound, research suggests that it has an anti-obesity effect through its action on uncoupling protein 1. The long story short is that Fucoxanthin acts on your fat cells to increase heat production and therefore thermogenesis. This is the same process, by the way, that is activated with the use of thyroid hormones. And it's one of the reasons that Fucoxanthin is great for patients who have thyroid disease. This thermogenic effect primarily occurs in brown fat, which regulates this process. So by combining Fucoxanthin with any other supplement or treatment that increases brown fat, you end up with a winning strategy for weight loss. It's unlikely to drive significant results by itself, but it definitely has a complementary effect when combined with other fat burners. For physiologic benefits, look for a dose of at least 4 milligrams per day. You can take Fucoxanthin by itself, or you can get it by taking a brown seaweed supplement. Speaking of brown fat activation, next on the list is a spice called grains of paradise. This plant, which is related to ginger, is most often used as a spice, but sometimes also as a medicine. Its claim to fame, and the reason it makes this list, is because of its brown fat activating compounds known as 6-peridol and 6-gingerol. One study looked at women who took pyridoxine, which is a standardized extract of grains of paradise, and found that women who took it over 4 weeks saw a decline in belly fat as well as total body fat compared to placebo. The proposed mechanism for this effortless fat loss was thought to be due to an increase in whole body resting energy expenditure, which is likely increased through the activation of brown fat. As you might imagine, the combination of grains of paradise with Fucoxanthin, which we just talked about, can be particularly powerful given their synergistic mechanism of action. For dosing, I'd recommend sticking to the standardized extract known as pyridoxine, which contains 15% aphromols and 12.5% of 6-peridol. Number 6 on the list is 3,5-diiodo-l-thyronine. Don't let the name confuse you, it's just another way to describe the thyroid hormone known as T2. And as a thyroid hormone, T2 is the perfect fat burner. It's not as well known as T4 and T3, which are the thyroid hormones found in prescription thyroid medications, but it's still potent nonetheless. Research is underway to fully evaluate how T2 functions in the body, but here's what we know so far. It's at least partially responsible, if not more so than T3, for regulating basal metabolic rate. It activates brown fat tissue and browns white fat. It increases cellular ATP production. It helps regulate blood sugar, and it helps support skeletal muscle. It does pretty much everything you'd want a fat burner to do, so whether you use it is less about whether or not it works and more about whether or not it's safe. Unlike the other compounds that we've discussed so far, T2 is considered a body-identical hormone, which means it can be very powerful. But based on available evidence, human studies show that T2 does not negatively impact thyroid hormones or the HPT axis if used in doses of less than 300 micrograms per day. Given its ability to rev up metabolism and the fact that many thyroid patients are not producing enough of it, it's perfect for this group of people. As far as dosing is concerned, 30 to 100 micrograms per day will usually do the trick. But if you have hypothyroidism, you may need more. Just like other thyroid hormones though, some people are very sensitive to T2 even at low doses. So you may find that you need more or less depending on your own personal genetics. That said, I would not recommend exceeding 300 micrograms per day or you might run into unwanted side effects. Number 7 includes Hesperidin and Naringin. These are both powerful citrus bioflavonoids that can be extracted and added in high doses to various supplements. This allows you to take advantage of the beneficial compounds that are normally found in lemons, grapefruits, and oranges. And it's these bioactive compounds which are at least partially responsible for the anti-obesity effects of fruit. Contrary to popular belief, eating fruit will not make you fat, and in fact may actually help you lose weight. Study after study has proven that the more fruit that you eat, the more likely you are to be lean. But let's put that aside for just a minute. Even if you aren't on board with the idea that eating more fruit will help you lose weight, this isn't a problem for Hesperidin or Naringin extracts because they don't contain any calories or fruit sugars. By extracting out all of these bioflavonoids, you can get all of their benefits without any of their baggage. Research has shown that the way that these compounds help you lose weight is by upregulating the genes that are involved in the breakdown of fat. You simply won't find cleaner or more natural fat-burning compounds than Naringin and Hesperidin. For dosing, look for a Naringin extract of 98% or greater and a Hesperidin extract that has 90% or greater bioflavonoids. The dose for both is 300 milligrams per day. If you're like me and you like the idea of efficiency, I left a link to a supplement that contains almost all of these compounds in the description below. On that topic, if you like the idea of using supplements for weight loss, then I'd recommend checking out this video on berberine next. It's not a fat burner per se, but it's still just as powerful.